Chat Show. My name is Jack Mclaughlin. I'm your host, and tonight my guest is Justin Crowe. He's head of human performance at Melbourne Victory. Prior to working at Melbourne, Justin worked at Paralympics Australia for 2 years, a physiotherapist consultant at PAC, and he's worked at Australian Institute of Sport in a lead project role and head of high performance at Essendon Football Club. Prior to working at Essendon, he was also a rehabilitation coach at Collingwood Football Club. Before we start this episode, our mission here at Prepare Like a Pro is to empower aspiring staff and athletes with practical knowledge from some of the industry's most inspiring individuals and to strengthen the AFL community. If you like the show, please show your support by following us on Instagram and subscribing to the podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Welcome, Justin. Thanks for jumping on, mate.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Jack.
Let's dive into the beginning of your career, mate. At what age did you discover you wanted to work with elite athletes?
Yeah, good one. I ended up enrolling as a physio out of school, but the real reason for that was I did work experience in a sports law firm. I thought at school sports law was the way to go, and then I realised after 1 week of year 11 work experience, I didn't want to work in the office. so I sort of did the maths and worked out what options there were that were in an office, and physio was it. So my passion grew over time, but I knew I loved sport. But the physio was something that I sort of grew into.
Yeah. And was it a physiotherapist that you had met where you got introduced to the role, or take us through why physio opposed to I guess the technical side, or
there was
other roles?
I had seen a physio with a back complaint, so probably not uncommon for taller young guys. And the physio was a guy called Amir Takala, who's still practicing here in Melbourne. He does people with gymnastics, that type of thing, but he's a really short fella. And I remember he had to stand on a box
to assess
the back, and but he had good energy about him, and I just sort of thought, I could see myself doing something like that, and then rocked up at physio school and took it from there.
Yeah, and it's not an easy feat from anyone that I've heard that's completed their physiotherapy degree. Take us through, for those listening in that are thinking about it, or perhaps they're currently just started the degree. Take us through the demands of the course.
I was at Collingwood as a player at the time, so I was part-time physio, which worked all right actually. Things have become a bit more professional in AFL since. I was able to, a Tuesday morning sample, we'd go down Kerford Road, be done by 8 a.m. or something like that, and I'd get off to uni. Look, physio is a fun degree. It's it used to be 2/3 girls enrolling physio, which is interesting. I don't think the proportions are probably a bit better balanced in sports physio. Once you sort of get to the pointy end, there's probably better working conditions in some of the other physio streams, some of the hospital work and that type of thing. Things may have developed a bit since then, but a couple of years of heavily theory-based work, anatomy biomechanics, a lot of what there's out there, exercise scientists, and so on would have studied, and then moving to more of the practical stuff, getting out in the hospitals and sports clinics and the field, and learning, like everything, I reckon, learning a lot of stuff on the job.
Getting your hands dirty, for sure. Yeah. And so early on, the degree is a lot more clinical, is it? More medical based?
Yeah, a lot of theory sort of required. Anatomy, biomech, physiology, even pharmacology, all the different sort of base things. That's where I think some of the unis now have gone to a model where they'll combine streams, the podiatrists and even exercise science and speech pathology, all those different streams will study together for the first year or two and then go off into their different directions.
Yeah. And you touched on being a professional athlete at the time of doing your studies. At what point did you transition into undertaking being a physiotherapist by trade?
Yeah, so by the time I got delisted, I'd finished the equivalent of 2.5 years of physio, I reckon.
Yep.
Which actually was pretty good timing, because the hardest thing to do if you're a medical student or a physio student in professional sport or Olympic sport or public system is the placements.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, timing worked pretty well for me. So I knocked off my placements over the next year and a half. And well, what I actually did was I then just thought, let's get out of Melbourne as far away as I could. I went over and did some voluntary work for a soccer team in Ghana, in Africa, and we just spent 3 months there with just helping out. Didn't really
hook that up.
Didn't necessarily know what I was doing, but yeah, I know that was just a volunteer program. So yeah, anyway, the PRFC they remember it. They were in the top league of Ghana, but they had no fans because they were owned by the power company, and every other team had a location, and local people supported them. So that was pretty good fun. And so that's where at Melbourne Victory, sort of, people say you haven't really worked in soccer before. It's largely true, but I did have a really short stint in the Ghanaian Premier League.
Yeah, fantastic. And when you took on that role, was that when you recognised that elite sport and working with athletes, team sports was where you wanted to go with your career?
Yeah, I think so. And I think in my short-lived AFL career, I had a broken leg and a maybe 6 to 9 month rehab period. Yeah. And I sort of got to work with a rehab coach there, Chris Howley, who's still around the traps. And I really liked the work he was doing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that sort of seems a pretty good mix. And that was what really led me to so I finished my physio degree, and I went on and did exercise physiology post-grad just to get my head around more of that exercise science side, and really try to be someone who can live in both those spaces, that medical space and the performance conditioning space as well.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so EP, how does that, for those that aren't aware, how does that sort of differ from a physio? I guess you got physiotherapist, EP, and then strength and conditioning coach. How do you sort of see them?
So I mean, a physio and EPs both have sort of accreditation through, I don't know, a generalised. It's got APRA here in Australia.
Governing body.
Governing body. Yeah. And they both work sort of, their work overlaps a bit, I suppose. In the hospital system, and best practices, they work together. Mm-hmm. But even in sport, you sort of certainly saw this in Paralympic sport, Olympic sport, where physiologists and physios need to really work hand in hand, and in strength and conditioning coach as well. There's part of the challenge of integrating a really good sports medicine team is getting everyone to be able to be comfortable to work together, and also let people play their strengths at the right times, I think. Yeah,
for sure. No, well said, mate. And you mentioned Chris and Amir. Who are some other strong influences as you were developing and sort of honing your craft at this point of your career?
Yeah, I think people at every stage, generally the leaders I work with. So Malthouse and Mick Malthouse was a coach at Collingwood when I played there and worked there, and David Butterfin was a high performance manager. Both really people focused leaders. Sort of learned a lot from them, and took a lot away from how they approach things. Then Neil Craig, John Worsfold, those type of people at Essendon sort of had different ways of approaching things that I really appreciated. In Paralympic sport, there's a lady, Kate Mclaughlin, who's the chef de mission for the last. Well, she'll be chef de mission again in Paris, but she's an incredible leader. That is a massive undertaking to take a Paralympic team to Paralympic Games, and she just nails it cycle after cycle. And then look now Tony Popovich and different leadership styles and different people. It's just always there's something said for staying somewhere and really getting stuck into things, but the more different people I work with, the more you learn as well. So sort of appreciate that. And then the other influence like most is their family. Sort of came from sporting family. Mum in sports admin and dad AFL player. My sister Olympic gold medalist. So plenty of people influencing me along the way.
Yeah, it's fantastic, mate. That's Sporty family. Must have been competitive growing up.
I was the runt of the family. Know
that. Yeah, wow, that's impressive. The Crows, hey. You talked about different leadership styles. Mick and Dave with people focused, and then Neil, Craig, and Worsfold. So, what's one that you've sort of leaned into? What do you see your sort of leadership style? And
good question.
You've had some significant leadership positions. Yeah.
I like to think that I still keep that people first focus from early on. I think Collingwood did well at the time. I reckon from Craigie, I really took a performance focus and how to keep that front of mind.
Yep.
So and then I know that's such a hard question to answer. I feel like how I try to lead, or how I try to create a positive performance environment and support our practitioners is influenced by all those people.
Yeah. And when those two things pop up, like, is it when you've got time to, I guess, think about things, do you lean on a certain philosophy in terms of maybe when you're stuck on which way to go with challenging decisions? You're like, okay, well, people first is a strong belief. I'm gonna lean on that, or is it a performance? You know what I mean? Like, how do you go about?
Yeah, it's good.
How does it influence your decisions? I guess.
The probably biggest driver, or the biggest thing I think about is the sort of starting with the end in mind, and preparing for that. If you generally keep that front of mind, making decisions, I think that's pretty important to me.
Yeah.
And then but also there's always a line where you're never sacrificing someone. You're trying to keep people well, and remembering we're playing sport, not there's plenty more to people's lives than just what goes on at the club.
Yeah. Okay, well said, mate. Love that. It's good, because it is challenging at the end of the day, like, because you're judged obviously on wins, but at the same time, if players don't feel like you care and you treat them as people, you treat them like robots, you're going to lose them pretty quickly, which, like you said, think of the end result, you're probably not going to get a conducive performance environment with that as well long term. Like you say, it's sustainability.
For sure.
So I think, great advice for strength and conditioning coaches or anyone working in sport and in leadership. What about for yourself, mate? What are some of your favourite ways to develop your methods? Is it leaning on your network that you've built up over the years? Is it research, podcasts? How do you like to self-develop yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I did a hell of a lot of formal study. Like, I reckon I worked out from prep to when I finished my doctorate was 30 odd years, just non-stop. So that was always in the background.
Yeah.
Look, I just really try to follow my interests. Right now I'm doing the La Trobe performance health, female performance health modules, which are ACE. I mean, that costs $50 and it's incredible. It's like the level of presenter in that is outstanding. And I'm learning a heap, so if I'm interested. Interestingly, one thing John Worsfold sort of brought to my attention was a sort of model of professional development that was developed in critical care nurses or emergency department nurses, where people develop from novice to expert, and that each, through competent, proficient, a whole different stages. But at each of those stages, you learn differently. So as a novice, you're best to be given a lot of structure, and usually you're best to be taught by someone who's at a competent level, not necessarily a master, because the master sort of loses a bit of memory of the structure and how that initial learning happened. And then as you sort of become more proficient or masterful of things, not to say I'm masterful at anything, but as you sort of move along that journey, you learn more by talking to other people at a similar level, in a nuanced way. So I think that's I always try to remember that if there's something that I feel like I'm novice level at, then I really seek out that sort of structured
Formal learning.
learning, and then if there's something that I've spent enough time in to become proficient at, then I tend to reach out to other people in at a similar level.
Yeah, I like that. I've never heard someone break it down that way, but it makes a lot of sense. You can apply that to anything.
Yeah, I think in terms of athlete development plans or performance plans, which is an area which I'm quite passionate about. It's really important to remember that as well, that there's a pathway and different levels of learning. You sort of think, well, you hear some clubs where there's a whole lot of freedom given to a group, and other clubs where there's a high level of structure. Yeah. And I think both of those things can be important at different stages of an athlete's development. So really sort of nailing that's important as well, I reckon.
Yeah. And on that, at what point is that an age thing for you, or is it other markers that you would measure an athlete's level of maturity to start having some flexibility around there?
Yeah. What do you reckon? It's not only age. I've seen some pretty mature 28-year-olds.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, look, I think the maturity time in a system,
like a trust element.
I think again there are some sort of traits as people move through this sort of novice, advanced, beginner, competent, proficient, expert framework, and you can. It's not a bad way to look at it as well. What sort of traits is someone showing? Are they able to make a decision quickly about something, that has good rationale, or are they even at that point where they can make it intuitively and make a good decision? So, I wouldn't say it's as simple as someone's age, but it's not a bad way to, probably not a hopeless way to do it either.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a simple way. Like, you sort of, the AFL clubs 1 to 4 years are in an academy potentially, and then, but then it is, though, like you mentioned, there's a fair gap, and just because someone's the age of 30 doesn't mean they've got.
No, that's right.
They're right.
And over my career, there are some senior athletes who thrive with the structure as well. It's important to remember that you might find some younger athletes that really struggle with too much direction, and the challenge there is knowing that they do need it. So you just got to ride that out at times. But at the other end, there are some athletes who there are some things they just can't be bothered thinking about. And they actually really appreciate it. Yeah, and I don't think there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, it's great. And then how would that look for the S&Cs listening in, that potentially are looking after a group where there is a different group of athletes at different levels, so open age, I guess. How would that look in the gym or on the field or in rehabilitation, do you think?
Yeah, well, the amount of time and direction you're giving them. I think we've got to be really mindful of what we say, what we provide. That if we provide too much and say too much, it loses some of its impetus. And if we just getting learning and each day about our athletes and communicating with them and getting a feel for what they do best with, and also watching them grow and being able to adapt as they carry on that journey as well. So look, there might be differences in programming, might be differences in level of autonomy. There might be differences in just the level of care and time you take with each of those athletes to help them get better. Yeah.
And going back to your career journey, so after Ghana, was it straight to Collingwood in that rehab role, or was there a role in between?
Yeah, I did work as private practice physio for a couple of years, which I didn't mind actually. And then did my ex-phys placement at the Pies. And then stepped into a full-time role after that.
And how'd you find that, going from an athlete a few years prior to now being a staff member?
It was all right. Like, it was the same environment, which was comfortable for me. But look, saying that, I think it's different when you've only been there 3 years and gone and come back. Where it was, I see some players who spend 15 years at a club and then start a role, and you just sort of wish they would go somewhere else for them.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think, it was, for me, it was quite comfortable.
Yeah. And for those that aren't aware of what a rehab coach does, what's sort of like a typical day, or what's the key responsibilities of a rehab coach in an AFL club?
Yeah. So it really is, I would do very little hands-on physio in the rehab role, but I would, some at times. I think there's different rehab physio roles around that have varying levels of hands-on sort of acute treatment.
Yeah.
But I would, in a long-term rehabilitation, I would have a plan, work closely with the physios and the S&C, and just really give that player structure and attention and a really high level of care each day in terms of their rehab. And then you have you guys are missing 2 to 4 weeks who you're trying to get that balance between conditioning, recovery, and that reintegration into football. So they're the types of things that would fill a day for a rehab coach or rehab physio.
Yep. And you can be, no doubt dealing with some challenging cases, because being players want to play football, they don't want to be in rehab. What would be some of your advice for coaches that are currently in a rehab role in terms of supporting athletes during those challenging times of long-term rehab?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. Yeah, you don't necessarily want players to love spending time with you, because although generally they're pretty keen to get back and play. Yeah. But I think that's one of the keys for me, is just taking the personal approach and the time to listen each day. Have a plan and largely stick to it, but listen, be aware that rehab is often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Helping a player with that expectation, and just providing them with that, true north and direction they need. And I'm a big believer in linking everything they do to the field, or to their return. So keeping things purposeful is also something I recommend. And generally, there's not much issue with motivation, that type of thing, when the athlete sees a purpose.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. And so how long were you in that rehab role at Collingwood, at the Pies?
Yeah, so it was 3 years, I reckon. That included the 2010 Geelong Grand Final and replay.
Yep.
And a couple of incredible altitude training camps we did through that time as well. Whether you believe in altitude training or not, it was that was
ahead of its time, wasn't it? At that time,
they were awesome camps. A lot of fun, and some really good training. And there's something to be said about climbing a mountain, whether the altitude, the effects of the altitude aside. That was an incredible time. And then again, when I started Essendon, I was in rehab sort of role as well. So would have done a good 5 years of that. Look, even now, in my role at Victory, one of our women's players did ACL in the first round of the season, and so rather than have our physio who was working with the team have to include her rehab into his attention when he needed to be focusing more on winning the championship, I've sort of done a bit of rehab work with her to take that take that lead and really support the practitioners with the team who are going to be playing and competing as well. So still like to keep a little bit of that rehab work going. Yeah, it's fantastic. So it's a passion for you. It's something that you love doing, helping athletes return to play. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that's the rewarding factor, or is it the challenge that you like? What's the aspects that you like of that rehab role? I think it's rewarding. I really like spending time in that space between the medical and performance worlds, like getting that walking that balance beam where there's pressure to get it right and allow the pathology to heal, and at the same time get someone fit and prepared and as ready as possible. That's super interesting to me. And that's where I like to spend a lot of my time.
Yeah. There's probably no better way of measuring how well you and the athlete have worked together than rehab in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
And on that, when it doesn't go well, which no doubt that's going to happen because it's full-time athletes, they're doing a lot of things and they're pushing the boundary of their capacities all the time. How do you sort of personally, obviously you got to look after the athlete, but to get your own headspace right before talking to the athlete, what are some processes that you do, or is it more just something you deal with that quite naturally?
I think it's okay to be disappointed. And I sort of with staff within teams that I work with, I'm always really aware and supportive of, to some degree going through that emotional roller coaster. An injury is really disappointing. And a recurrence is really disappointing. Nevertheless, the athlete looks to us for that, that direction, some sort of plan, some level of clarity. And, I think it's okay to ride that emotion, but when we got to remember what the athlete needs from us at those times, and it's usually to be a bit of a steady head. Now that was actually really important when we spoke about the lead into Paralympic Games with our HQ, our team in HQ, our physios and doctors and so on in HQ, that we were always level. That you'd have athletes coming in who just won a medal. You'd have athletes coming that had had disappointing performance. But our job was to keep a level environment in there that players or athletes could rely on when they came in.
Yeah. And with that, like, I imagine there's a sweet spot between you not being like rigid with them and not giving you're sort of meeting them halfway and being empathetic, but then at the same time you're not trying to exacerbate the roller coaster. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a really good one for young physios. You have to listen, because physio will cop all the complaints. They'll cop the complaints about the food. They'll cop the complaints about the travel, everything. And if physio room, or even if there's a C coach in that situation, it's important to listen, and in some ways take the feedback on, perhaps, but not to buy in or to feed the negative aspects of it.
Yeah. And then talk us through moving from rehab coach to head of the department as high performance manager. At what point did you start working towards that goal, or was it something that was brought to you and it came to you, so to speak?
Well, that was an interesting time. That the day the Essendon supplements sort of scandal broke, the person leading the department at the time was stood down. And I was told, you're now in that role in the interim assembly team at 2:00. So,
oh wow.
that just happened quickly. And I was largely out of my depth at that stage, but we did my best. The rest of the time at Essendon, really, it was hard going in the sense that
spot fires all the time.
Yeah, a lot of psychological scars, a lot of work just to rebuild trust and support both staff and athletes through an incredibly difficult time. So, mate, I learned a lot and sort of developed a lot through that time, but in no way was it easy, and not something that I was targeting to do, or
right.
necessarily the ambition to do at that time.
Yeah, okay. So it was literally put on you, and what was your first impression with it? Was it excitement, or was it more like, oh, this is?
I don't know. It was just it was all reactive at that time. We just had to react to what was happening.
Yeah. And what was your support? Yeah, obviously, being the manager being stood down, what did you have a support team around? Did you bring your team members in for that year, or was it not until that year had ended?
We did. Really, that was no opportunity to bring anyone new in. And it wouldn't have been appropriate given what everyone had been through. Even for a couple of years after that, it was sort of, I felt like more out of respect and everything else that we needed to keep some stability and support people through, the medium term as well. So, by the time the last couple of years before I finished there, I sort of had the opportunity to be a bit more proactive and actually, start to form some more systems about how to do things. But I would say that largely early on we were reacting and just doing our best in a difficult circumstance.
Yeah. And knowing what you know now, like what did you learn through that challenging period?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot about just keeping calm, listening better, and or less the technical things. I think less the technical, sports science, human performance things. More the softer skills through that period. I think were what I mostly took away.
Yeah, and then from your role from Essendon Football Club going into the Paralympics, I believe.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So they Paralympics Australia has a number of offices around Australia. They have one in Melbourne that's at the base of the hangar. So I had to walk down 2 flights of stairs to start my new job at Paralympics. But that was awesome. that was incredible. And I would happily, if it wasn't that Melbourne Victory came knocking, I would happily still be there. An incredible organisation, do great work. Support really professional, high level, high performance programs with para athletes. And you know what? One thing I did learn about para sport is it attracts practitioners who are in it for the right reasons. People who aren't in it for the glory, they're in it for their, to help the athlete, and also smart practitioners who are capable of dealing with complex presentations and shifting dimensions, which is a trait of para sport. So the people working in that space are incredible, and I was fortunate enough to be associated with it for that period. Yeah, and talk us through what a typical day and what were your sort of key responsibilities in that role? Yeah, so through the cycle, the lead up to the games, it was supporting and I suppose helping our athletes and sports prepare for the games. So a couple of our sports, goalball is a blind sport, as an example, gets no government funding. So we would provide some servicing and support in that sports science, sports medicine space, as well as coaching other things. And then at the games, my role was to lead the HQ, or lead the medical HQ. So the doctors, physios, recovery physiology, psych, nutrition, that area. And in parasport, more so than Olympic sport, our athletes rely on that space. Some of our better funded sports have their own practitioners, but not to the extent of at the Olympic Games. So we had a really high number of athletes use those facilities, and look, it was a really challenging games with a lot of uncertainty leading in, and just so proud of the group who went over there, and what a great job they did to support that Australian Paralympic team. Yeah, and uncertainty with the times, is it that due to the COVID pandemic just starting? So this was for the Tokyo game, so there was a reasonable level of doubt right up until the end that they may not go ahead, which is a difficult space to operate under. 100%. And then the actual nature of the games was challenging itself. People weren't allowed outside the village except to go to their events. It was very much a bubble. We created an even tighter bubble within the Australian building. We decided not to allow our athletes to go to the dining hall, which is a big call. In parasport, the dining hall is a place where athletes and para-athletes realise or get to see, hey, I'm not alone here. There's a real community of para-athletes out there. And we didn't do that lightly.
Yeah.
But we also had athletes on our team with 40% lung capacity and different medical conditions. We put them at really high risk if they caught COVID.
Sure.
So we played the safe route. They brought us closer together, and in the end, we had a really good games.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. What a great result, and no doubt well deserved for the team as well as, of course, the athletes. What were some of your sort of proudest moments during the games?
Oh, look, we had some of the athlete performances were incredible. Look, Rachel Watson's a swimmer who, she had quite severe convulsions after her heat, and went on to win a gold medal in the finals. Just an incredible effort. The wheelchair marathon gold medal was super highlight. I don't know. You go on and on about some of the efforts in the games, and they're not in the Paralympic Games. The highlights aren't necessarily gold medals. They're some really good performances by athletes and teams. The goalball team, who had never won a game at the Paralympic Games before, went on to win 2. Be really competitive against Turkey, the eventual gold medalists. So we made some really, really big highlights.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that Melbourne Victory came knocking. Talk us through the role that you're currently in, and it sounds like you're across a couple of different areas there, so you're heavily involved by the sounds of it. But take us through.
So my role at Melbourne Victory is across the A-League Men's, A-League Women's, and Melbourne Victory Academy programs. So I support the sports science, sports medicine teams within each of those parts of the club. I think it's a really progressive role. I'm really pleased that Victory put it on, because it gives some great extra attention in the women's space. It helps us, support our athletes to a higher degree in the men's space. In the academy space, we just have so much opportunity to grow and do things well there, as well. So it's a big role. I spend a lot of my time day to day with the men's team, the seasons will run concurrently, starting in November this year, which will be a lot of fun. Actually, I can't wait.
Yeah, it sounds like 3 full-time roles, mate.
We have some very good practitioners on the ground, and as an example, I don't have a critical match day role, so I can go to the game and be there to support people and jump in if needed. But the team can travel without me. It can do everything it needs on match day without me, and that's the idea. That I'm really primarily there to support our practitioners.
Yeah. And you mentioned it's a progressive role. Are you the first person that's been in this role at Victory, or was someone in the role prior?
Yeah, no, it's a new role. Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you like about that role that you think other codes should follow?
Well, I think we see it in other codes. I don't know that there's many that would be across men's and women's programs. In part of I think of AFL. I think part of the reason AFL is because the high performance manager role is still so hands on. But it doesn't have to be, I reckon. And it can still find that balance. So I wonder if other codes, as their women's programs grow, if they don't start to look at a model where there can be leadership and direction across programs and some consistency and support that rather than have these programs running so separately, in some ways up to their own devices. So when you say hands-on, would you on a typical day be running warm-ups and field conditioning sessions and programming, those sort of things, or you're purely there to, like as you mentioned, to support the staff and largely to support the staff and the communication with the coach. Also, I do jump in on the tools in all sorts of ways. If the physio can't make it, I'll treat. If I've jumped on the massage tables and massage players when a massage specialist hasn't come before. If we have a play in rehab who's better off inside, then to allow everyone else to go out and run the session, I'll stay inside and work with that player. I'll step in and take a warm up if we're desperate. But that's part of, I suppose, the helpfulness of my background is that I can sort of work across a few different areas to plug the gaps, but also be in a way to support people, not to do their job for them.
And on that, with how do you like to conduct your meetings? Is it one a day? Is it the start of the day? Is it reflecting at the end of the day? Talk us through meetings on a daily basis, but also weekly as well, and then how that feeds into feedback from a maybe half a year, mid-year sort of review, if that happens. Or
I like to run through the player list quickly, player by player, each day when we've got all the information before we train. And then I think that's a really important meeting, so everyone walks out with the same message on the same page, and we can have provide clear direction to the coach. And outside that, I don't really like meetings, but we would, weekly we would get together and probably take a bit of a broader view, make sure we're incorporating some of the psych, wellbeing, nutrition aspects from practitioners who aren't necessarily on the ground every day, as well. And I do think it is worth in season stepping back sometimes and just think. One exercise, as an example, used in the past, is just look at a clock and which players are overcooked, which players are underdone, who's in the sweet spot at the moment. Just actually throw up the magnets and get a feel for, okay, where's each individual layers, anything we're missing? Are we developing them as well as we can? I think it's good to step back when you can, but as everyone in pro sport knows, it's that the weekly competitive cycle can make that difficult. And I suppose being a little bit removed from that cycle in my role is helpful for that. Yeah,
so you can have that sort of big picture perspective.
Yeah.
And on that, whether a player is tinking on the edge of high risk, or they're in the sweet spot, or do you sort of go off, what do you lean in most in your decision making? Is that off objective markers, subjective, gut feeling, coach instinct? Like, talk us through how you sort of make those calls.
Yeah, usually in that exercise where we're throwing out the magnets, most of it's instinct. But remembering that the information we're looking at, we're all looking at every day as well. So you're taking that information in.
It's informed.
To make an informed appraisal, right or wrong. And I would say I've really changed my view on testing over my career. I spoke to, before he passed, there's a guy who won the IOC medal for physiology, Ben Saltine, and I asked him what the most important thing that happened in his career was, what the most important thing he learned in his career, and he said, every time you take something from an athlete, give something back. And he was talking about testing, that every time you test, you take. You take a little bit of the athlete's time, a little bit of their energy, even if it's largely non-invasive, it's still their data and information. And we can be in danger of taking. And if what we're taking is informing important decisions and influencing decision makers, then it's a waste. It's just taking from an athlete who is giving a lot of other things as well. So I really do believe in objective testing and making decisions based off that. I'm also really careful of not testing things that we're not it's not really useful to us, and also doesn't enable us to give the athlete something back that can be tangible.
Yeah. And what would be some examples that you've sort of used to do that now you currently wouldn't test?
We don't use any of the Nordboard style force plate, any of that stuff anymore. Actually, another good example is I don't take wellness information anymore with our group. We do in the women's space we do in the academy space. In the men's space, every player shakes every coach's hand when they arrive, which actually provides an environment where there's not going to be a player you haven't seen before they go out to train. So every player's the opportunity to bring something up. You have a chance to read their body language. And I think in the end, if the player's not going to report to you in that environment, then they're probably not reporting on their wellness either. So we just took out that extra thing we were taking from the player, which was every player having to remember to enter their wellness information. And roll without it.
Yeah. And how have you found?
It's been fine.
Yeah.
It's been fine.
Yeah. You have to remind players to do wellness every day.
Yeah. And it takes that out of it as well. You know, that dealing with that non-compliance that can crop up. Yeah, I remember one of the coaches I worked with, Bomber Thompson. He used to say, "Well, what if I just took all the GPS away? What would you do?" You have to talk to people. But I sort of remember that. You always get that in the back of mind as well. You know, the
it goes with the people first. That
Don't get objective at the expense of the time with the people.
Yeah. And on that one, I like that. It's not something I've heard of before. Is that the handshake? So is that with just the coaches, or that's actually all staff members that talk us through?
I've never seen it in AFL, and then in perhaps it's common across soccer or A-League or international football. I'm not sure, but that's a respect thing, and it's a nice thing. It's probably not great COVID practice, but it's it's also a really nice way to make sure you've seen everyone every day. Yeah.
And so that's something you're involved in. You partake in.
When I arrive, I shake every other coach's hand and each player's, and if they come to me or I come to them. Yeah,
nice. And we talked about briefly some challenges and some highlights, but looking back at your career so far, what would be your biggest challenge that you faced, and what have you learnt from it?
Yeah, I think the logistics of the Paralympic Games was just incredible. The scale of some of the logistics required for different athletes and bringing that all together, it was just a massive undertaking.
Throw COVID in there as well.
Yeah, particularly in the context of COVID. Like one of the coaches in one of the sports is on dialysis, and so we took over basically a shipping container of dialysis fluid and facilitated that could continue through the games. All sorts of dietary requirements and different individual needs that are really important. And you can forget about able-bodied sport if you're not careful. But we just really had to nail down. That was a huge challenge and an incredibly rewarding one by the time we got to the end of it.
Yeah, amazing. So that would be also a proudest moment by the sounds of it as well.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I was really proud to win the AFL Premiership. I was really proud to win the FA Cup and the women's A-League women's with our girls this year. Proud to play an AFL game. I don't know. I think sports. You're not, even if you're not winning things, sport is constantly rewarding and providing highlights. So. That's why we're in, I suppose. Yeah.
And you mentioned as well, like going on that Collingwood success, the camps that were going on, that was pretty. I imagine at the time pretty forward thinking. Is it? And you mentioned there's the psychological benefits that can come from those challenging camps. Is that something that you've installed into your philosophy as well with pre-season camps?
Yeah, look, pre-season camps have been more difficult lately. But
of course.
I think, what I think about a good pre-season camp, But it depends when it is in a pre-season. You know, it could be highly match focused, sort of in the final preparation phase, around sharpening group up. There's real benefits to getting a group together. It can be really helpful for a dietitian and a conditioning coach and so on to see how people live and eat and behave, and provides opportunity to work with players around some of those things that can be harder when everyone's back in their home environments. There's a lot of advantages to a camp. I think, and largely I would expect the team coach to drive the direction of the camp and the rest of us to fall in line, mostly.
Yep. Well said, mate. We're moving into the personal get to know Justin side of the podcast now. First one, you don't necessarily have to have one. Not everyone does. But do you have a favourite inspirational quote or a life motto that you like to think of?
I do. It doesn't roll off the tongue, but I do like the idea of prepare rather than protect. I always sort of remind myself of that. And the other thing I go through a phase where I write something on my notepad for a period of time just to keep it in front of mind. Like, one recently is how do you make people feel? It's really important when you, particularly when you're working with a staff member, to have an awareness of how you make them feel, because most of what they'll remember will be how they felt, not necessarily the information that was shared. So, that's probably the other one recently I've just been keeping front of mind.
And with your role, like how much from an, I guess, mental energy perspective, would you be thinking of staff members' development with a ratio compared to athletic sort of development with the athletes? Like, is it a 50-50 or is it like it's swayed more towards one than the other?
Yeah, I try to keep a large focus on staff. Might not be quite 50-50, but it might be 30-70.
Which is a fair bit.
Athletes inevitably take a lot of everyone's focus, as they should. But I do think it's really important that and also really important for the athletes that we are supporting our staff.
Yeah. Next one, in your work life, what makes you angry? Do you have any pet peeves?
Oh, I was going to say too much testing. It really annoys me. And testing without purpose. That'll get me going.
Yep. And favourite way to spend your day off, mate?
Yeah, with my young family. Adventures with my daughter. That really recharges my batteries for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll start to wrap up the show. What's on the horizon for 2022? It sounds like there's a fair bit going on at Victory.
Yeah. Well, we have the new A-League men's and A-League women's seasons are really exciting. So the women's season's been expanded to 20 weeks, which is ace. Really great move in the right direction. Obviously, there's the Men's World Cup in November, December. Which is pretty fun to watch. And then the Women's World Cup next sort of June, July. So there's a lot going on in the football space over this sort of 2022, 2023 period.
How will your role sort of be with those players that are involved in the World Cup squads?
Yeah, so we will, the A-League will shut down, the A-League men's will shut down during the Men's World Cup. Which will mean our players, who are lucky enough to be in those squads will just go. I'd be surprised if we have any other international players in their international squads, but it's possible. And then we'll keep the other guys ticking over in the meantime. And then the Women's World Cup will fall outside of the season, which it's really exciting. I just hope that makes a really big splash here in the country, and we can. Women's sport as well as soccer can really grow from that event. Yeah,
absolutely. Go the Aussies, hey, represent. We've qualified. It's super exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Well, thank you so much for jumping on the show and sharing with us your journey thus far. I'm firm believer that success leaves clues, so it's great to have someone that's worked in different codes, been in the athlete's perspective as well as the staff members' perspective. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on. I've taken heaps from it, and no doubt that listeners will too. If anyone wants to get in touch with yourself, where's the best place to connect?
Yeah, just shoot us a note on LinkedIn, and we can take from there if you want to reach out. No problem.
Yep. Well, we'll add the LinkedIn link in the show notes, guys. And thank you for those that have tuned in. If you tuned in halfway through, make sure to watch the start of the show. We'll release it next week on our podcast. But for now, you can watch it from the very start on our YouTube channel. Were you going to say something there, Justin?
I was going to say thanks. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. Thank you. And our next live chat, guys, will be a collaborative one with Australia's leading high school strength and conditioning coaches. That will be next Thursday, the 4th of August at 7 p.m. So make sure to jump on that one. It'll be a ripping event. I'll see you guys then. Cheers again, Justin. Thanks, mate.